We have arrived at part 4, page 604 of the endocrine system, and we're focused at this time on this diagram that involves the release of growth hormone. When does this specific molecule get its major release is during sleep, and particularly during sleep that has not been preceded by food intake for a couple of hours, because insulin actually functions as an inhibitory factor and turns off growth hormone. So if you would like to have, restorative sleep, then it's good to do it on an empty stomach and have a fresh dive into the sleep. Then I'm going to present here my own handout, which I'm sending to you by email attachment. And it takes a look at the relationship between what I like to call bad stress or good stress. The word stress in graduate physiology usually means that a tissue or a cell grouping is working. It's simply working. When the cells or the tissue is stressed, that means it's carrying on its job. And it could be something that involves practices and training. So if you're an athlete and you practice your athletic skills and you get in shape, that's good stress. You often feel really good from it. Children who go outside and play and have a really good time playing tag or ball or whatever it is, ride their bicycles, then they're having experiences of good stress. They're having fun, they're playing. On the other hand, if there is an injury of some kind or an infection, then this is considered bad stress. Some people have bad stress in a more psychological sense, if they're being scolded, or if they are experiencing something that causes them to feel on some level inadequate or not good about themselves, then they might be in fact considered feeling bad stress, or perhaps they're engaged in an activity they don't want to do. I remember as a child that I would get very, very tired from carrying out certain chores, like cleaning storm windows and putting them up as a small child, taking down the screens. We lived in a 4-season climate, so the types of chores that were required of me, I actually gave my father haircuts starting from the age of 12. He was a businessman, and it was very stressful at first. I got used to it after about several months or a year. I got actually relatively good at it, but it started at the age of 12. I actually cried initially, so one could say I was experiencing bad stress. Under these conditions, cortisol is released in higher levels. Under normal conditions, good stress, there's going to be growth hormone, there's going to be modest levels, small or modest levels of cortisol, and they will be used to guide the growth hormone. A very common finding, actually, for many women of childbearing age is the experience of menses. And right before menses, the uterine lining is being prepared for implantation. So after ovulation, there's a great deal of activity on the part of the growth factors to prepare differently the endometrium with special secretions and ready to receive a fertilized egg. After or as soon as menses starts, the stress of that activity ends, and the rest of the body gets to have nice growth hormone after menses, and the energy, the psychological energies are sort of relieved and soothed. So here we have the normal situation where we have growth hormone. Notice that one of the main things that growth hormone does is act upon adipose tissue to give you energy. It acts upon the liver to produce mostly the growth factors that will do most of the work, and not so much actually on this at all, on muscle and skeleton. As we come to the book, which is an update of that diagram, notice that the growth hormone really doesn't actually act on skeletal activities at all, according to the more recent findings. It's the liver's factors, growth factors, that entirely act upon the skeleton and the musculature. So if you're looking for good bones and good muscles, and you're trying to get up to be sort of buff and strong, and you're going to the gym and have high hopes for the future of that sort of thing, then one might be very, very careful of one's sleep, actually, and make sure that the stomach is empty upon arriving in bed, because you're actually going to build all that. You went to the gym today, but the stimulus was to actually create this cascade that happens in sleep. So it's something that sort of you have to put together in your mind. Oh, I'm engaged in this training, and I'm not really going to fulfill the training until I actually go to sleep tonight. Sort of an interesting, slightly different way of considering your situation. Okay, there's a lot of people who are quite ruthless with their sleep, and not a wise idea. So here we have the growth hormone being released. It's usually in the first 4 hours of sleep that we get the big release. We're going to go to the liver, and we're going to get insulin-like growth factors. We're going to get many, many types. They're also known as somatomedins, and they become tissue-specific as they exit the liver throughout the entire night and take up residence. You'll notice, if you're a gentleman listening to this, that you have 5 o'clock shadow sometimes, and you wonder, well, if the growth hormone is released at night, how does it take place that the hairs on my face continue to grow by day? And this is the reason why, is that you have growth factors becoming resident in those tissues. Okay, we're acting on the skeleton, we're acting on the muscles, we're getting increases in cartilage, formation of skeletal growth, increases in protein synthesis, proliferation of soft tissue, including muscle, etc. The growth hormone can actually act directly on fat metabolism, and with the assistance of glucose, or rather cortisol. You might recall that cortisol is part of the nighttime cocktail, and cortisol's prime directive, as it turns out, we haven't gotten there yet, but the prime directive is to produce glucose from fat. It's called gluconeogenesis. The other detail here is that we are looking into the storage forms of glucose as glycogen, and we have our friend glucagon over here that is synergistically working with growth hormone, and we're going to increase the blood glucose as a result of that. These are referred to as anti-insulin effects. The effect of insulin actually is to take glucose up from the blood into the cells in general after eating. Right? We have a nutrient-rich bloodstream after eating a meal, and insulin is required to assist in the uptake of those essential nutrients into the cells that need them. So these are anti-insulin effects where we're going the other way. We're going to those storage places where we stored our glucose as glycogen, and we're releasing it now, so that all of this infrastructure activity can happen. Children can grow bones and muscle and limbs. They can also grow 2/3 of their cortex. Children are born as infants with only 1/3 of the cortex, and 2/3 of the cortex must grow in order between the age of birth and 5 years approximately. So they're laying down a great deal of circuitry. 2/3 of the cortex, that's a lot of activity. And the earliest developmental stages, you can go back to your Piaget developmental psychology for this, is that walking, one of the first activities, is not learned. It's a maturational development of circuitry. And that speaking, actually, again, the first languages are not learned. They're developed through the development of pathways, neural pathways, in which mimicry and sound starts to become associated with meaning and desire and outcome. And so that first language is just a consequence of the sound that people are using nearby to make themselves understood. It could be Chinese, it could be English, it could be German. There's a variety. Okay?